Well, the ABC's latest episode of Behind the News, their classroom edition for primary and high school students, tried to explain the Israel-Hamas war to students. Have a look at their biased coverage.
Since 2007, most of Gaza's essential supplies have come through this border, which Israel controls. But after the recent terrorist attack on Israel, the Israeli government shut the border completely and has been launching rockets into Gaza in response. Weeks on, aid groups say many of the 2 million people who live in Gaza desperately need humanitarian assistance. And lots of countries around the world have pledged to help out.
With just only one mention of terrorism, that one-sided coverage has sparked dozens of complaints to the ABC and the Communications Minister. Well, an anti-Semitism expert, Dr. Dave Rich, is here visiting from London and he joins me now. Welcome to the program. What role do you think the media is playing in inflaming anti-Israel bias?
You know, an issue like the conflict in Israel and Gaza has the potential to be incredibly divisive in our own countries, and it's really important that the media is even-handed and fair and balanced in the way that it tells these stories. We saw with the explosion at a hospital in Gaza that was initially misattributed to Israel and turned out to have not been done by Israel at all. That wrong story, that false story, led to riots in several cities across the Middle East, fire bombings of 2 synagogues in Tunisia and in Germany. So it has an impact well beyond the region and well beyond the conflict. It's really important for the media to get things right.
Look, often people on the left have tried to say, oh, it's, our criticism of Israel, our anti-Zionist position isn't anti-Semitism. They've tried to separate the two. Do you think those two are now indistinguishable in the light of this war?
So there always has to be a place for legitimate protest and legitimate political campaigning, especially when there's a war going on as there is now, and Israel is a country with a government like any other that can be critiqued and criticised. But there's a difference between legitimate political protest and utter hatred directed at a country or a community like the Jewish community here, which is not Israeli and is not responsible for anything Israel does. And we saw the way some people reacted to the absolutely horrific terrorist attack by Hamas on the 7th of October. There were some people in some of these anti-Israel protest groups that appeared to be quite happy and celebrating what happened. They were out on the streets, certainly in Britain, protesting and marching straight away. And I think that sends a message that perhaps it's not, for all of them, it's not all about human rights. It's actually about focusing some really extreme attitudes and extreme opinions onto Israel, and that then impacts on the Jewish community.
I mean, you make the point that right in the wake of those terror attacks, so that was before any retaliation from Israel had happened at all. Families in Israel and the Jewish community around the world were still reeling very quickly. Doesn't that show that this is anti-Semitism? If people are out in the streets celebrating those terror attacks, that's anti-Semitism.
I mean, we saw in the UK the pictures from here in Sydney of the demonstration outside the Opera House. When people are chanting, "Gas the Jews," there's no ambiguity about that. There's nothing anti-Israel about that kind of phrasing. And we saw in London and in Manchester in the UK as well, people really happy at what Hamas had done. And I mean, that can't be called legitimate protest.